don't you fall for it. Keep your head up, never let them get you fed up. You just step up, get your rep up, get your cash up, get your check up. The whole system's a setup, it's time we really get up. We've been about this revolution from the time we met up. Take it back, I got my fists up, Malcolm X in 88. But revolution only works for those that will participate. You are great, they are fake, yo, it's time to demonstrate higher level mental states. Conscious people congregate, show the love, not the hate. This is basic, no debate. But these people are debating and they hating, they should wait. It was bickering amongst ourselves and got us in this state. Yeah, the truth is inconvenient, but the truth is never late. You can't see what they be doing, how they thinking, how they moving. You can't see what they pursuing, making claims none are proven. Don't fall for it, don't fall for it, don't fall for it, don't fall for it. We can see who is the enemy, sovereignty's the remedy. You don't need telepathy, it's white supremacy. Don't fall for it, don't fall for it, don't fall for it, don't fall for it. Bringing the raw, doing a tour, government officials bringing the law. You never see what you never saw. 303, open the door, knowledge reigns, that is the game. Ignorance, that is insane. Don't fall for it, the reps and the Dems are the same. This one's shooting us up, that one's locking us up. This one got us stuck, that one's out of luck. You can front if you need to, the cycle never ends. No justice, but in 4 years they hyping us again. Don't fall for it, don't fall for it, don't fall for it, don't fall for it. If you thinking and you earning and you drinking and you burning and you really not concerning with the news and what they learning, don't fall for it, don't fall for it, don't fall for it, don't fall for it. If you love it, never hate it, you agreeing, don't debate it. HBCU educated, your degree is highly rated. Don't fall for it, don't fall for it, don't you fall for it, don't fall for it. Yo, me, I'm not a fake dude, I'ma keep it real. They see through it all that America needs a heel deal. America ain't really sick, this is what it really is. Gunshots and cages for black and brown little kids. Now they acting like they not the cause of how we live. Do not tell me what you gonna do, I can see what you did. Look at her, look at him, look at them, look at me. Do you see our interests represented in society? No, you don't, and you won't, cause democracy's a joke. Every 4 years, these same people asking us to vote. Nothing changed but the Range Rover switching lanes over. I remain the flamethrower, knowledge reigns, game over. Don't fall for it, don't you fall for it. Rodney King, George Floyd, man, we all saw it. So don't protest with defiance, but don't move with self-reliance. While the soul is being silenced for the religion of science. Don't fall for it, don't you fall for it, don't fall for it, don't you fall for it. If you thinking and you earning and you drinking and you burning and you really not concerning with the news and what they learning, don't fall for it, don't you fall for it, don't fall for it, don't you fall for it. There's no justice in the courts, we are always taking shorts. They can shoot us like a sport, and it's our trust that they want. Don't fall for it, don't you fall for it, don't fall for it, don't you fall for it. Take it up! Don't you fall for it.
Good morning, good morning. Welcome to Real Mad TV, where you always get the mad reaction, but sometimes I come in peace. Today I think I'll be pretty much peaceful, even though I haven't had breakfast yet. I will be making that as soon as I start this video. Ain't gonna take nothing but about 6 or 7 minutes. Give it a good start for the opening arguments of this hearing meeting on exploited kids, missing kids, trafficking kids. I ran through a little bit of this video, and some of the things that I was hearing was unbelievable. And it's like this was all going on under our nose. It's a damn shame. But I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday. I know this is my first time back since Thanksgiving. I had a wonderful holiday. I hope everybody else did too. So let's go ahead and jump into this so we can get this party started. Let me set this up here. Boom, boom, boom. And here we go.
Come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Without objection, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Pfluger, is permitted to sit on the dais and ask questions of the witnesses. The purpose of this hearing is to examine how the Biden-Harris administration's crisis at the border has led to increased numbers of trafficked, missing, and exploited children. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Subcommittee on Border Security and Enforcement and the Subcommittee on Oversight, Investigations, and Accountability. This is a joint hearing on the trafficking, exploitation, and missing unaccompanied children of the southwest border. We're here today to examine how the Biden-Harris administration's border policies have allowed dangerous cartels, criminals, and human traffickers to prey upon the world's most vulnerable people, unaccompanied children that come to our country. Our committee has been actively engaged in addressing this important issue. In August, I, along with Chairman Green and Bishop, sent a letter to the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Humanitarian Services and Director of the Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement, Robin Dunn Marcos, requesting critical information on the screening and vetting of potential sponsors. In September, Chairman Bishop and I held a member briefing with officials from the Department of Homeland Security and Health and Human Services to better understand how DHS encounters, screens, and transfers unaccompanied children to HHS, and how HHS subsequently places those children with potential sponsors. As the administration's border crisis continues to spiral out of control, the number of unaccompanied minors arriving at the southwest borders has increased greatly, turning the situation at the border into a devastating humanitarian catastrophe. In fact, the Biden-Harris administration has encountered nearly 530,000 alien children at the border to date. In comparison, the Trump administration had less than half that number over the same period of time. I think America, we should ask ourselves, well, why are so many children arriving at the border alone and afraid, sometimes in the hands of an unconfirmed relative with no apparent indications of family connection? These children show up with arbitrary phone numbers and addresses scribbled on their arms as if they're like packaging arriving at someone's warehouse or doorstep. Some children arrive at the border, appear to be drugged, preventing law enforcement authorities from properly questioning them about those they're traveling with. This is outrageous, and it's an affront to the very core principles that form the morality of any decent nation. Certainly, Americans should not accept this moving forward. The purpose of this hearing is to put some hard facts on the table so that we can work together on both sides of the aisle and address actual solutions. The Biden-Harris administration has stated that they have the most humanitarian border policies in history, yet we witness these horrors that are happening, and there's nothing humanitarian about enabling criminal cartels to exploit, abuse, and profit from vulnerable children. Once the children enter the United States, Customs and Border Protection, the CBP, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and Health and Human Services, HHS, are tasked with their well-being and safety. Initially, CBP works to process and screen those children once they're encountered at the border. Next, HHS works to identify and place them with a potential sponsor. Finally, ICE works to ensure they follow through with their immigration court proceedings. That's how it's supposed to work. However, those agencies do not have the capacity or resources to handle the sheer number of children who've crossed the border in the last 4 years. Compounding this crisis, the administration is not thoroughly vetting potential sponsors. This is a serious weak link in the chain. According to information leaked to the media, Health and Human Services reportedly lost contact with more than 85,000 unaccompanied children between 2021 and 2023. Now think about that. That's the size of major cities in America. In my district, that would be about the size of Lake Charles, Louisiana. 85,000 children that are stated and known to be lost, and this was a year and a half ago. We are appalled that our government has neglected its primary duty to protect the safety and well-being of those children placed in our care. It's entirely unacceptable that the current administration has allowed human traffickers to take advantage of this ongoing border crisis. We have a responsibility to our nation to fight against the human trafficking horrors and to find and rescue the children that are currently missing. I'd like to express my gratitude to our witnesses for appearing before the committee today. Before I yield to the ranking member of the Border Security Subcommittee, Mr. Correa, I'd first like to thank my good friend and colleague, Representative Dan Bishop from the great state of North Carolina, for joining me one last time as we work together to bring awareness to this very important topic. After winning a special election in 2019, Representative Bishop was appointed the seat on the House Homeland Security Committee. He later became chairman of the Subcommittee on Oversight, Investigations, and Accountability in 2023. Known for his tenacious questioning of hostile bureaucrats who've come to testify before both this committee and the House Judiciary Committee, where he also serves, Dan has devoted himself to combating the abuse of weaponized government. Dan is an extraordinary champion of the right to free speech, defending the homeland through strong border security and enforcing the immigration laws passed by Congress. Agree or disagree with him on policy, Dan Bishop's intellectual rigor and command of the law are indisputable and have earned him the respect of colleagues on both sides of the aisle. There is never any doubt about where Representative Dan Bishop stands. It's been an honor to serve with him on this committee, and I'm sure that he will continue to use his God-given talents to serve our country. With that, I yield the balance of my time, and I recognize my friend and colleague, Mr. Correa.
Good afternoon, and thank you to Chairman Higgins and Chairman Bishop for holding this most important hearing today on unaccompanied children. And I want to thank our witnesses again for being here. Thank you for your time and interest. I'm going to listen to your testimony from you, the witnesses, very closely, not just as a ranking member of this committee, but as a father, as an individual that I think all of us in this country care about children. We want to find some good solutions to these challenges. And I hope that this hearing will also generate some good bipartisan, across the aisle solutions that all of us can work on moving forward. Let me be clear at the onset that it's everyone's responsibility to make sure all our children, as many children as we can put in safety, that we put them there. It means ensuring that these children that we're talking about today are protected at all stages of the immigration process. And that includes when they're encountered and held at the border, transferred to the Department of Health and Human Services, and sent to what we hope is a vetted sponsor. All of us want to stop human trafficking, child trafficking, and other horrible, unspeakable crimes against children. Human traffickers are not going to be waiting for us or our permission. They're going to keep doing what they do. But again, I'm interested in hearing solutions today from our witnesses, and also how you believe we can implement those solutions. All of us can give advice and counsel, but I want to hear, how do we implement them based on the constraints that we have? And of course, Mr. Chairman, we all need to address the root causes of this problem of immigrants approaching the border. You know, earlier hearings, we discovered that 80% of the women, by the time they reach the southern border, are either raped or sexually abused. It's a long, expensive, and dangerous journey. So the question is, what would prompt people to undertake that journey? What would prompt parents to let their children go on this very dangerous journey? None of us want these children crossing our border or making this journey. Nobody in this committee wants to see that situation. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it that prompted these individuals to undertake this journey? A lot of young children I've spoken to in other countries have said, either I leave or I join a gang. One way or the other, I'm probably going to die. Others come from families that have nothing to eat, essentially starvation. It's what prompted our ancestors to come to this country. Stay in Europe or starve. You got a choice. Also, we need to investigate those individuals that are making a lot of money from trafficking children, dropping kids over our wall, as well as those individuals in the United States that actually make a buck from looking the other way and hiring children to do adult work. And of course, we also need to make it easier for the victims that are trafficked to move forward, come forward, and to ask for help. I work closely with my Republican colleagues to counter a lot of human trafficking, child exploitation. And I've also spoken to special agents at Homeland Security investigations to hear about their investigations. What are they doing and what tools do they need to be more effective? And in this committee, I've spoken to many CBP officers about the ways they identify human trafficking situations. And I've also heard from the Department of Health and Human Services on their efforts to improve outreach to unaccompanied minors, expand access to post-release services, and improve the vetting process. And just last year, our Chairman Higgins and I introduced H.R. 4574, Cooperation on Combating Human Smuggling Trafficking Act. This bill would enhance Homeland Security's transnational criminal investigative units, which help stop trafficking in the home countries before these children undertake that long journey. I'm glad this bill has passed out of this committee and then is now scheduled to be marked up in the Senate, and hopefully we'll be able to get it to the president's desk for a signature. But so much more is left to be done, and that's where all of you come in. And of course, we know that basically we need more agents dedicated to investigating these cases, preventing child trafficking and exploitation. And we also need more legal services available for children so that toddlers aren't defending themselves in a courtroom. And we also need the resources for more home visits of those sponsoring unaccompanied minors. We need to make sure that those children, after they're placed, are actually in safe living conditions. Those are just a few things that we need to do. A lot of work to do across the aisle. A lot of work. And finally, Mr. Carroll, I want to note that saw your prepared remarks, and they don't conform to the rules of the committee. Here in Congress, we don't accuse sitting presidents, vice presidents, or members of Congress of treason. But you are invited by the chairman. And in this hearing, I'm going to respect that. I'm going to make sure we move ahead and hear your testimony, sir. We want to be productive here and move forward. And with that, I want to thank our witnesses for being here. And finally, I also want to turn to Mr. Bishop, Chairman Bishop. Sir, every once in a while, you and I have disagreed on issues. Just once in a while. But I've enjoyed the debates, the discussions, the intellect that you brought to the House of Congress. And like the chairman has said, I don't think you're done. I think you're taking a reprieve and going to recharge the batteries, and God knows where we'll find you in a couple of years. Give him a round of applause, please. Thank you, sir, and may God be with you. Mr. Chairman.
Ranking member yields. I now recognize the chairman of the Subcommittee on Oversight, Investigations, and Accountability, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Bishop, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Correa, both of you for your very kind words. My passing from this place doesn't hold a candle to the seriousness of the subject that is before us today. So I appreciate your comments, but I want to get to the matter at hand. And I do want to say to Mr. Correa, I have such a fond feeling for you, sir, and it is important to say that we do have very fundamental disagreements, and yet you are a warm-hearted, kind individual. And I wish that it were possible for us to express just how deeply our differences are felt without it appearing sometimes that we dislike each other on a personal basis. I do not. I haven't disliked anybody in this Congress. Well, I'm sure there's probably an exception or two to that. But for the most part, it is merely the seriousness of the problems that we confront and the deep disagreements about what leads to them that I think leads me to the things I'm going to say right now. Child sex trafficking and the most horrendous sorts of victimization that you can imagine. Sheer hell on earth. I don't know how you can talk about that need without reckoning with whether or not decisions that each of us made gave rise to the need that is articulated. Why did the people come? Because it was declared that the border was open. Let's face it, that's what was declared. That's why you saw a sudden, dramatic change. You saw a massive, complete 180-degree reversal of policy that had attenuated the flow most successfully in history. It was 100% reversed. And so we see the horrific circumstances that you now want to articulate more burdens on the American taxpayer to attempt to solve. You want to impose more burdens on the men and women of law enforcement who are already overburdened with the problems we have in society in the United States that will now be increasingly neglected because you have chosen to recreate in the United States to a substantial degree the horrific circumstances that are causing people to flee elsewhere. I too want to thank our witnesses for joining us today to examine this tragic crisis enabled by one of the major parties in politics in the American political system and the Biden-Harris administration's gross mismanagement of caring for unaccompanied migrant children. And I think it also bears noting at the beginning, what we're examining here today are the unaccompanied children who went into the care of the Office of Refugee Resettlement and were supposedly cared for to the best of the capability of the overtaxed resources of the United States of America. And it overlooks every other migrant child who came in, many of them purportedly with family units to which they may not have been genuinely attached. And what has happened to them? We won't even see that in the numbers, upwards of 100,000 that we say have gone missing. We don't even know. Those people aren't even represented in those stats. So under the Biden administration, over 526,000 unaccompanied alien children crossed the southwest border. Unprecedented number. Each year, from 2021 to 2023, CBP encountered over 130,000 unaccompanied children, more than twice the levels seen under the Obama and Trump administrations. While CBP is usually the first point of contact for unaccompanied children who cross the border, The Health and Human Services Department's Office of Refugee Resettlement is primarily responsible for the care and placement of these children. Much of this work is done in partnership with non-governmental organizations that provide shelter and services, usually under contract. Under the Biden-Harris administration, these NGOs received a windfall of taxpayer money through ORR, whose budget for its unaccompanied children program was $6.9 billion in fiscal year 2023. We throw these terms around, these numbers up here, like they don't matter. $6.9 billion, and my good friend and colleague in California is up here talking about we got to get a lot more. We need a lot more. Southwest Key Programs, the largest housing provider of unaccompanied children, one contractor, received more than $2.5 billion in taxpayer funding over the past 3 years. This summer, the federal government sued Southwest Key, alleging that employees engaged in a pattern of sexual abuse and harassment against children in its shelters and failed to take sufficient action to protect the children in its care. Do you see how the dominoes fall? This is what happens when you begin with one ill-considered, ideologically bound decision that did not take account of the realities on the ground or the circumstances that would certainly ensue, and they have ensued. Another company, Deployed Resources, has had a contract for a migrant facility in Greensboro, North Carolina, my state, since May 2022. $39.5 million has already been spent, with another $64 million obligated. But incredibly, according to HHS, no children have been in care at the facility from the time it became operational in March until it went into standby in June. Do you see how the consequences proliferate of unbelievably bad decision-making? What do we spend all that money on? The Biden-Harris administration placed political aims above the welfare of unaccompanied migrant children who crossed or were trafficked across the southern border, releasing UACs, I'm not going to use that term, releasing unaccompanied children with inadequate vetting and follow-up to avoid the bad optics of crowded facilities. The Office of Refugee Resettlement releases children to sponsors in the United States. Thorough vetting of these sponsors is absolutely critical and morally compelled if that's the path you're going to undertake to bring these children across. Unfortunately, the Biden-Harris administration's push to bring in migrants, to quickly release migrants, resulted in countless cases of migrant children being released to sponsors with major red flags, placing children at obvious risk of exploitation that has played out in exactly the exploitation that would have been anticipated. Far too often, children are released to sponsors who do not care about their welfare and intend to exploit the child through, at a minimum, child labor, and very often far more heinous forms of trafficking. Is it really in the interest of these children to rush to release them to individuals who are trying to sponsor multiple unrelated migrant children? This is a systemic failure that has put thousands of vulnerable children in risky situations here in the United States. This failure goes well beyond the vetting issues on the front end. As an Inspector General report earlier this year made clear, that the federal government cannot account for tens of thousands of children that HHS released to sponsors. 32,000 children didn't show up for their immigration court hearings. Those hearing dates are one of the only opportunities that ICE must engage with unaccompanied children and observe signs of trafficking.
Did he say 32,000? Come on, man. Miss Lynn, you are correct. Every party had a part in this. But this administration here, the leader of this guy's administration, been around for 50 years. This is crazy. This should have been the number one thing he should have been on top of. I mean, it'd be hard to kind of blame this guy who only served 4 years, unless your name was Biden. Because you've been around for 50 damn years. But 32,000 didn't show up to the hearing? That's fucked up.
Trafficking or exploitation. What happened to those? What happened not just to 32,000, each one of them? What happened to that child? We do not know. They cannot be reached. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Over 290,000 have been released by HHS without a notice to appear for an immigration court date at all. So there will be no such opportunity to observe signs of trafficking or exploitation. There's no way for them to ICE to monitor their location, the status of these children, or verify their safety. We've asked and even subpoenaed HHS for information about the screening of potential sponsors and the children that they've lost contact with. In many cases, documented by investigative journalists with the New York Times, children released to sponsors who may not even be related to the child ended up working dangerous jobs to pay off debts or send money back home, often working night shifts or dropping out of school. Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent to enter into the record 3 articles on exploited migrant children, brutal jobs across the United States. That's February 28, 2023.
Let me pause this for a minute. I forgot to share myself on Twitter. But yeah, it is ridiculous, very ridiculous. It's like they're not talking about it, we overlooking it. And like I said, this stuff is going on right up under our nose. But they get us to concentrating on other things. Whenever there's something big pops up where everybody's starting to talk about it, go find out what everybody's not talking about. You know what I'm saying? Give me 1 second, you guys. I need to make this share real quick here. We got to promote my damn self. Good. Pull up Twitter here. So how's everybody doing this morning? Salute, Gertrude. Thank you for joining me. Okay, almost ready. And there I am. Okay, I can get out of that. And close this out so we can get back to the show. Yeah, this is very ridiculous. And it's like the heads up here watching and know this stuff is going on and they ain't working harder to put this stuff out. But they be real quick to say something about damn number 45 and number 47 though. Weak ass motherfuckers. But I ain't even gonna start this morning. I'm eating my Jimmy Dean, enjoying the show.
Second one, as migrant children were put to work, U.S. ignored warnings, April 17, 2023, New York Times. And finally, U.S. failed to safeguard many migrant children, review finds.
Without objection.
2024. The federal government has precipitated and is facilitating this humanitarian catastrophe. The unaccompanied children are released from the HHS shelters right into the hands of these sponsors, despite multiple warnings from staff.
And tell you the truth, I'm gonna put you guys on to something. I need to go back and find this information. But would you believe something like this happened like 110 years ago? And it was all across the world. We have video proof of this as far as old videos that they're, you know what I'm saying? You know, they bringing things back to life and things. And it's like certain regions of the planet had nobody on it in these major cities. You know what I'm saying? We're not thinking back to the 1800s, late 1800s and things like that. Like, what was everybody else doing? But when you get video feed of these areas, especially places like Moscow, that's a top city in Russia. Why would it be empty in the late 1800s with all the buildings constructed and nobody around? It looked like a purity ghost town. And it was like that on numerous places and stuff. This going into the 1900s and things like that, where we were starting to hear all these stories of orphans and, you know what I'm saying, foster kids and all this stuff back in the days, the 1920s, 30s and stuff. All this stuff is tied, and it seemed like they were trying to repeat history again. But I could be wrong. But I'm going to go back and look that information up and try to bring it to y'all.
Staffers within the agency that the vetting process was failing to protect children. The Biden administration was so focused on moving people through the system as fast as possible that they failed to ensure the safety of the children they were releasing. Many of these children already suffered at the hands of criminal cartels on that treacherous.
I got an issue with that shit too. I'm starting to warm up. I know it's been a while since I warmed up here, but how come they can find homes for all these children coming across the border if that's what they did? When we have children sitting in these same positions in this country from like most of their life, throughout their teenage life, they can go in at 7 years old because of bad parenting and stuff like that, and they sit around in detention centers, all kind of camps and stuff until they like 18 and shit. They don't try this hard to find these people home, but you can find these immigrants homes. Something don't smell right about this.
Journey to the border, only to find themselves exploited again after leaving government custody. The human cost of this impossible to understand bad judgment is simply heartbreaking and tragic. I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses as we shine a light on this monumental failure. Mr. Chairman, thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Thank you, Chairman Bishop. I now recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Oversight, Investigations, and Accountability, the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Ivey, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to join with both of you and my comments regarding Chairman Bishop of North Carolina. We had a chance to work together on a subcommittee, several hearings actually, with respect to forced labor, and I appreciate the work that we were able to do together on that. We also serve on the Judiciary Committee together, and I share the view about his insight, his legal acumen, and his energy and passion that he brings to these. And I was mentioning to him, I was campaigning for another candidate down in North Carolina and happened to see some of his commercials down there, and I realized what a full contact sport politics is in North Carolina. I'm going to stay in Maryland, I guess, but I do appreciate the fact that you've done such great work, and the fact that you're leaving public office, I assume, does not mean you're leaving public service. So I look forward to your continued work. As they say, God is not finished with you yet. To the matters of the day, I do want to say this. I actually share in the concerns that have been voiced, I think, by all three of my colleagues so far with respect to the dangers and the horrors that these kids have been facing as they not only face sometimes death, sometimes maiming, sometimes sexual assault as they make this trip to the United States, but that the system has let them down here when they get to the United States. And I think those have been well documented not only by this committee, New York Times reporter Hannah Dreier, and I believe these are the three articles that Chairman Bishop just put into the record.
No, this son of a bitch didn't. No, we didn't let them down. It was their choice to make their journey. Wherever they came from, let them down. You can tell a bitch-ass Democrat got down when he started talking. That ain't got shit to do with us. Yeah, now, once we are aware about it, yeah, we have to hold some kind of responsibility to it, but it wasn't our responsibility to have them walk all the way. It wasn't our responsibility for them to cross at least 2 oceans to get here. So I don't know what the hell he talking about. But if I'm wrong, let me know. I'm just saying.
And I referenced these as well. One of my colleagues from Michigan, Hillary Skolton, said that stories of kids dropping out of school, collapsing from exhaustion, and even losing limbs to machinery are what one expects to find in a Charles Dickens or Upton Sinclair novel, but not an account of everyday life in 2023, not in the United States of America. So I think we can all agree that there are horrific circumstances here in the United States right now that these young people are facing. And I think we have to try and figure out how to work our way out of that. And I'll say this too. I mean, we've got a new administration coming in. I've heard some comments by some of the nominees, and I'm not sure that what they're proposing actually would necessarily address this particular problem. There's a lot of focus on shutting down the border, and that's certainly of interest, I think, to many of us on that front. But figuring out what to do with the kids that are here, I think, is the immediate challenge that this hearing, I hope, will focus at least in part on, because as has been stated, there's at least, I think, 320,000 is the number that I've heard here in the United States, many of whom have not been located, many of whom we don't know what they're doing or how they're doing. And I do want to make sure we figure out how to touch base with them and help get them on the right track. Many of them are due for court proceedings. I don't know that those are on track. Apparently they are not. And I think we need to address that too. I know my colleagues have made some comments about money, but unfortunately, I think money is going to be relevant to trying to address these problems. It's going to be expensive to locate these kids. It's going to be expensive to try and put them back in connection with their parents to the extent they are here. To the extent there's a decision about sending them back to a different country, that's going to be expensive. To the extent there's a decision made about keeping them here, that's going to be expensive too. And I do want to note that
Come, we getting stuck with the bill of sending them home. Who funded them to come here? Whoever funded them to come here, they need to fund them to go back home. Why are we held responsible for that? And I'm not being mean, I'm just keeping it real. They already had enough money. They came in here, got free food stamps to get the food that they wanted from their country and all kind of shit. We black Americans, and not once do we have a damn African aisle in a damn store to show us where black food and stuff come from. But they can get the food and the food stamps and stuff for their food. That's fucked up. Man, let them fund their own trip back. Put their ass on the boat, smack the boat on the back, and send it up the river. I'm just saying.
the FY 2024 congressionally enacted budget for this particular issue, unaccompanied children program, is $100 million less than the prior year and the president's request. And then for the FY 2025 budget approved by the House Committee on Appropriations, more than $3 billion less than the prior year and what the president requested. Now, money doesn't fix everything.
And I said this a few months ago. This dude only has one watch. I'm just saying. Every time he up here, he only has that one watch. That must be his favorite watch. That thing must have cost about 10 to 20,000. He wear that shit like a motherfucker.
I'm, of the mindset that money can play a role, but there's got to be other types of impact that can make a difference on these sorts of things. But I really do think money's going to have an impact here. And Mr. Correa referenced a moment ago the issue about unrepresented minors not getting any legal representation to the extent they're coming through court. Some of them might not speak English. Some of them might be too young to understand what's going on. Some of them might be old enough to understand what's going on. But I can tell you, the immigration process is a complicated legal system. Now, I remember in this committee when we were voting on, I think it was H.R. 2, if I recall correctly, Mr. Magaziner offered an amendment to that bill that would have provided funding for legal representation for kids in these circumstances, and that was voted down and has not been included. So I hope that's one of those things that we can revisit as we move forward with this. And I'll say this as well. I think that one of the things that we really need to do is make sure that well, I'll say it this way. I read in the testimony two statements, well, multiple statements actually, about the harvesting of.
Miss Lynn, that is the bingo question right there. Remember, I always said, we speaking up for these people for coming into the country. Well, one party was. But what use here, if they so fucking weak that they can't even stand up for themselves in their own country, we ain't got to worry about us. We seen ourselves stand up plenty of times. We just did it last month. You know what I'm saying? And it could have got worse if it didn't go the right way, because we know what we wanted. Both sides was ready to go. I think the other side would have been more, they would have got beat down. They was outnumbered. But we was ready to take it there because we got fight in us. These people coming across the border has no fight within themselves to stand up for themselves. But we want to bring that weakness into the country. And we went through it for 4 years, and you saw how weak we got. We don't want that weak shit here. And I can say that I got people related to me that came across the right way. You know what I'm saying? My kids' grandparents came across the right way. Started a business and everything. So what gives these people a right just to come in here and just get free stuff? But I didn't see that same energy for everyone else. But nah, they some weak motherfuckers there, dude. They have no fight in them. They can say whatever about the cartel or this and that. If you really wanted to fight back, you can beat them suckers. Outsmart them. I'm just saying. Yeah, they did. But these people we letting in ain't got that energy. Well, they say they don't. I believe some of them I feel bad for because they came here with good intentions. But then we don't know who's who. We looking at over at least 30 million. We don't know all their intentions. Right now, we can have a Trojan horse sitting in our backyard. These fools can open the damn horse up and unload on our ass anytime they want to. Why? Because we let them in, didn't vet them, didn't do nothing. We don't know their intentions. I was always looking at it from that perspective. Everybody wasn't looking at it from that perspective. It's like you letting the enemies in the back door. Then when things start blowing up and stuff like over in fucking Iraq and all that shit, then you gonna start crying and shit when we the ones who let them in. Spoke up for them. Protest up and down the street for their country. Which they ain't not gonna do that for us. That's one thing we gotta realize. They are not gonna do that for us. Yes, we should help people who actually need their help. A lot of them didn't need help. A lot of them just came here to protest and tear things up. Especially if the Democrats would have won. It would be a couple cities on fire right now. I'm just saying. I could be wrong.
Organs from children. And that was news to me. When I looked for footnotes and references and citations to support those claims, I didn't see them. So I'll say you'll have a chance to testify about those when your time comes, but those are very serious allegations. And to the extent that that's actually taking place, I would strongly support the effort to energize the Department of Justice, the FBI, to the extent I know I've got some colleagues that want to defund them, but I don't think they're going anywhere, at least I hope not. And I hope that we can try and address whatever these types of issues may be. Certainly the sexual assault, certainly the trafficking, certainly the international cartel activity. I know the Department of Justice has had some success there, especially with the Sinaloa cartel, but we got a long ways to go to actually make a dent on that activity. And then Mr. Carroll, I guess, I just got to mention this before you have a chance to testify and you can address it. But, staff found a couple of quotes from you about punching, I guess it was the speaker, square in the head, and the mass deportations will be swift, but they will be deadly. And And I'm concerned about those kinds of comments. Now, you'll have a chance to speak to those things. And, you know, I don't know that mass deportations are going to be the way to go, especially with respect to
Mr. Black Man, it's going to be very dangerous. It's going to be very deadly. Why? Because your black ass is not thinking about your people. What you motherfuckers did, and I have to point out this motherfucker, you know what I'm saying, on the screen. Because he's the one who sat here and spoke up for these people coming across the border. Once they came across the border, you forced them into black communities. You forced black people from another country into black communities here. So, like I said 2-3 years ago, when it comes down to deporting these people, a lot of our people are going to be approached, attacked, and everything, and we belong in this country. Why? Because you mix them into our communities. You sell out food. And that's a nice way to say it. You a sellout. You wasn't looking out for our best interests, you looking out for other folks' best interests. And then you mixed them up with us. Sorry, motherfucker.
the children, unaccompanied children issue, but you'll have a chance to discuss that. I look forward to questioning you about it as well. But to all of those here today, I'll say this. These are very serious problems. These are very serious concerns. These children are very much at risk here in the United States. We want to make sure that we do everything we can to address those problems and help to get those children back on the right track, as well as the immigration issue as a whole. And so, Mr. Chairman, I thank you again for giving me a chance to speak. Mr. Bishop, I got to thank you one last time for your service. Michael Jordan, you know, I guess he's kind of a goat out of North Carolina. Maybe you can be the Republican goat for Congress out of North Carolina as well. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Ivey. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. I'm pleased to welcome our panel of witnesses. I ask that our witnesses please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you, and please be seated.
Okay, Ms. Lynn, thank you for joining me this morning. I'll be back and forth. I'm about to set up, see what Truth and them got going on. I got many screens, so I can be all over the place. But for those who just coming in, yes, we have another live going on the team. You know, we can't be stopped. Content that matters. We have a day 3 of a trial going on Truth Hurts Crime. How do you say that? I forgot how you say that. Truth Hurts Crime and Justice. You know what I'm saying? Mississippi versus Shelton Timothy. Now again, that is day 3 of the argument. So we got a couple of good things going on today. Yeah, be in either spot. And I might not be done for the day, so this might be all day long.
I'd like to now formally introduce our witnesses. Mr. J.J. Carroll is a retired U.S. Border Patrol agent with a distinguished 24-year career, most recently serving as Deputy Patrol Agent in charge of the San Diego sector. Ms. Allie Hopper is a nationally recognized counter-trafficking expert and policy advocate dedicated to combating human trafficking and exploitation. Ms. Kathy Laren serves as director in the Government Accountability Office's Education, Workforce, and Income Security team. Her portfolio covers a broad range of issues, including child welfare and refugee resettlement. Ms. Tara Rodas, how do you say your last name, ma'am? Rodas. Ms. Tara Rodas is testifying in her personal capacity as an anti-human trafficking advocate, but professionally, Ms. Tara is an 18-year veteran of the Federal Inspector General community. In 2021, Ms. Rodas was detailed to the United States Department of Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement. As a detailee, she blew the whistle on the failures of the Unaccompanied Children Program and was threatened with retaliation and investigation. I thank the witnesses for being here today. The witnesses' full statements will appear in the record. And I now recognize Mr. Carroll for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Chairman Higgins, Ranking Member Correa, Chairman Bishop, Ranking Member Ivey, and the members of the subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to speak about the evil of child trafficking caused by the open border policies under President Joe Biden and his administration. I served in the United States Border Patrol for 24 years until I retired as a Deputy Patrol Agent in charge in San Diego sector. I worked under 5 presidential administrations, and only one president secured the border, President Donald Trump. Border Patrol agents went from working and being supported by the greatest border president in American history to the worst, President Joe Biden. My last year in the Border Patrol was Joe Biden's first year in office. On his first day in office, I watched in disbelief as 94 executive orders cascaded down from Washington, D.C., obliterating every immigration policy that had been provided the most secure border in America's history. Border Patrol agents were forced to carry out unconstitutional orders that violated every law in the Immigration Nationality Act. President Biden, through Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, created policy out of thin air, ignored federal immigration law, and facilitated the largest mass invasion into America that the world has ever seen. The United States of America will have spent hundreds of billions of dollars in 4 years to fund the needs of over 50 million illegal aliens that populate our nation. Between 1 in 6 and 1 in 7 residents in America is an illegal alien. America has suffered the greatest demographic shift in modern history. After serving in the United States Border Patrol for 24 years, spending a year researching and writing a best-selling book entitled Invaded, The Intentional Destruction of the American Immigration System, and filming 2 documentaries, I state with complete certainty that Biden, Harris, and Mayorkas intentionally, strategically, and purposely weaponized illegal immigration and used it as a tool to fundamentally transform America. Inside this invasion, the unspoken evil of child trafficking, and more specifically, child sex trafficking, has flourished. At the end of this current administration, the number of children trafficked will have grown to over 550,000 unaccompanied alien children known as UACs. This horrific number of children will have been arrested, released into America, and then lost. To put this into context, during President Trump's last year in office, Customs and Border Protection arrested 30,557 UACs who were accounted for and not lost. Conversely, in the first year of Biden's presidency, CBP arrested 147,975 UACs, most of which are unaccompanied for and lost. In 2023, Congressional Hearings, Health and Human Services, Javier Becerra, and Director of Office of Refugee Resettlement, Robin Marcos, forced to admit that their agency had no contact with over 85,000 UACs. They were lost. What did DHS, HHS, and ORR do to correct this humanitarian disaster? Nothing. In fact, all 3 agencies created further policies and procedures to increase the efficiency of moving UACs from the border to the interior of the United States to unknown and unvetted sponsors. Unaccompanied alien children were being handed off to total strangers. Then they disappeared into the darkness of labor and sex trafficking. In fact, a year later, in August of 2024, the Inspector General, with oversight over DHS, issued a report stating the number lost UACs was not 85,000, it was over 320,000. My business partner, Ryan Matt, and I spent 6 months traveling across America, filming a documentary titled, What is Treason Trafficked? The evil of child sex trafficking is difficult to digest and understand. However, after conducting numerous interviews with officers, agents, and whistleblowers from every alphabet agency and department, it was made clear to us that the federal government knowingly and actively facilitated these criminal acts. After several exhaustive months of filming, interviewing, and then editing this documentary, I state without reservation that the United States federal government is the world's largest child sex trafficking organization in modern history. The probability that thousands of these UACs are being raped at this very moment is 100%. The call to action has 3 parts, my call to action, and they're swift, and they happen at the same time. Every means necessary is to be taken to ensure all 4 borders of the United States of America are sealed shut. 2, there's a national law enforcement emergency to locate and rescue every single one of the 550,000 unaccompanied alien children that are lost. 3, a full-scale investigation of every U.S. department, agency, and every NGO participating in this criminal act shall be launched, and every person involved shall be arrested. Finally, the intentional opening of our borders is an act of treason. I encourage questions, so I may further articulate this allegation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. I recognize Ms. Hopper for 5 minutes to summarize her opening statement.
Chairman Higgins, Chairman Bishop, Ranking Member Carrera, and Ranking Member Ivey, and the distinguished members of the committees. Thank you for the opportunity to testify and for prioritizing this important issue. Human trafficking is one of the greatest humanitarian crises of our lifetime. In the 5 minutes I speak today, men, women, and children are being sold, exploited, and brutalized within our borders. As a Hispanic mother, this crisis is deeply personal to me. I have witnessed firsthand the unimaginable suffering experienced by migrants on both sides of the US-Mexico border. In one interview I conducted, a local resident whose property straddles the border told me about the screams of women and children he hears, including just 2 days before my visit. I walked these very paths, and I found discarded clothing, personal belongings, and chilling evidence of brutal assaults, all under the control of ruthless cartels like the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. No one passes through without their approval. Among the discarded items, I found IDs, many belonging to children, some real, others forged or burned. One was the passport of a 5-year-old Colombian girl. A haunting reminder of the dangers these children face. Traffickers erase migrant identities to smuggle them in under false names. In an interview with a former Sinaloa cartel affiliate, he revealed how cartels use advanced technology to forge documents and erase children's identities before crossing into the US. Tragically, the horrors don't end at the border. The very system meant to protect vulnerable children has become a trafficking pipeline. An OIG report recently revealed that 324,000 unaccompanied children processed at the border are currently accounted for. Policies from the Biden-Harris administration, prioritizing speed over safety, have placed children with unvetted sponsors, increasing their risk. Furthermore, this administration's decision to eliminate DNA testing to verify familial relationships has created dangerous loopholes, which traffickers are now currently aware of and actively exploiting. A young girl who arrived at the border in the custody of individuals claiming to be her family was bruised, disoriented, and in pain. Medical examinations revealed that she had been raped, yet she was sent back to her abusers because no verification was done to confirm her guardianship. This is not an isolated case, but a glaring failure of the system, leaving children in the hands of those who exploit them. The failure extends beyond the government to NGOs contracted by ORR to care for these children. During my research, I interviewed auditors tasked with inspecting an NGO-run facility in Pecos, Texas, and it exposed a lack of oversight with critical information filtered to mask abuse, neglect, and trafficking, as seen in the DOJ lawsuit against Southwest Key for sexual abuse of children in those shelters. Meanwhile, taxpayer dollars fund no-bid contracts for these NGOs, whose CEOs have tripled their salaries, hire staff teaching migrant girls to dance provocatively, and continue receiving payments for undelivered services. The crisis does not end there. Trafficking extends beyond sexual exploitation and forced labor to organ harvesting. During a recent interview I conducted in a Central American prison, the convicted trafficker described organs being harvested in places like veterinary clinics in Merida, Mexico, recounting the removal of 3 livers, often sold to US buyers. Another trafficker revealed that migrant children are the frequent targets. My colleague, Dr. Jared Sadolsky, testified last year about a 12-year-old boy whose eye was harvested in Mexico for $15,000. We need rigorous oversight, strong accountability, and where necessary, criminal prosecution of those who fail to protect these children. We must designate cartels as terrorist organizations, reinstate DNA testing, and demand accountabilities from NGOs and government agencies responsible for these children. With this new administration, the American people have issued a clear and urgent mandate, one that now rests in your hands. With top-down support, the trust of the American people, and the eyes of the world upon you, you have a profound opportunity to lead with decisive action. Today, over 324,000 children are unaccounted for, each one a life in desperate need of our protection. We cannot afford to wait any longer. These children's future depends on what we do today. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hopper.
Every time we watch one of these hearings, it seems like the number keep getting bigger and bigger. 340,000? Remember, we started off with 80,000 back in January, February.
I now recognize Ms. Laren for 5 minutes to summarize her opening statement.
Chairman Higgins, Chairman Bishop, Ranking Member Correa, Ranking Member Ivey, and members of the subcommittees. Thank you for inviting me here today to discuss GAO's work on the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement and its role in the care and release of unaccompanied children. In reports we issued in 2016 and 2020, we called on the agency to better ensure that those who provide care to unaccompanied children are qualified, to strengthen its oversight and monitoring of facilities housing these children, and to better track services that are provided to children after they're released to sponsors. HHS has made significant progress in addressing our recommendations, but as I will discuss today, more can be done to safeguard unaccompanied children. Every year, thousands of children enter the United States without a parent or guardian and without lawful immigration status. And the number of unaccompanied children has increased substantially over time, from about 14,000 in 2012 to around 119,000 in 2023. Many of these children have been exposed to trauma and violence, and they're at increased risk of becoming victims of child trafficking. The Office of Refugee Resettlement, or ORR, is the primary agency responsible for ensuring the safety and well-being of children that enter the country unaccompanied. ORR awards grants to providers that care for children in shelters, foster homes, treatment facilities, and other types of facilities until the children are placed with sponsors. Both state licensing agencies and ORR play a role in overseeing the facilities to ensure the health and safety of children in their care. Reports we issued in 2016 and 2020 identified several significant lapses in ORR's implementation of policies and procedures affecting the quality of care provided to these children. Since that time, ORR has taken action to address all 9 of our recommendations, and we've closed 5 recommendations as implemented. Specifically, with regard to ensuring that care providers are qualified to provide care, we found that ORR did not have up-to-date and accurate information about whether applicants were licensed, and as a result, awarded grants to providers who did not have a license to operate or who were unable to obtain one. We also found that ORR either did not have information or did not consider information that they did have about past allegations and concerns when awarding the grants, including concerns that providers were not meeting standards to protect the health and safety of children. As a result, grants were renewed even when there were significant outstanding child safety concerns uncovered during monitoring. We made 3 recommendations to address these gaps, and ORR has fully or partially addressed all 3.
So basically, what she's saying is they went out their way to place these kids into homes, but they won't do the same for the kids that belong in this country. This motherfucker full of shit too.
With regard to oversight and monitoring of facilities, we also found significant gaps. These ranged from providers not consistently notifying ORR about issues that could affect their state license, to ORR and state licensing agencies failing to share information about their activities and findings, which could hamper effective oversight. We made 4 recommendations to address these deficiencies, and ORR has taken action on all 4 and fully addressed 2. In addition, we found that ORR was not meeting its own monitoring goals. For example, they weren't always notifying providers right away when they found a compliance issue, and they weren't following up to ensure that issues were resolved in a timely way. Our recommendation in this area was fully addressed. I'd like to turn now to the question of what happens to children after they're released from ORR care. In 2016, we found there was limited information on follow-up and services provided to children after they were placed with sponsors. At that time, only a small percentage of children were eligible for post-release services. But as of November 2023, all children and sponsors are to have 3 virtual check-ins to confirm that children are residing with their sponsors, enrolled in and attending school, aware of upcoming court dates, and are healthy and safe. We recommended that ORR develop a process to ensure information on its post-release efforts is reliable and systematically collected, and this recommendation is still relevant and open. ORR has taken some action to revamp its case management system to include tracking of children post-release. Officials have told us that these enhancements will be complete at the end of 2024. This concludes my statement, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Laren. I now recognize Ms. Rodas for 5 minutes to summarize her opening statement.
Good afternoon, Chairman Higgins, Chairman Bishop, Ranking Member Correa, Ranking Member Ivey, and distinguished members of the committees. I thank you for inviting me to testify at this critical hearing on the crisis of trafficked, exploited, and the staggering 320,000 missing migrant children. Today, my goal is to spark action to rescue children, prosecute traffickers, and dismantle trafficking infrastructure. We must prevent children from being lost into slave labor, commercial sex, organ harvesting, and other unspeakable evils. Migrant children are working overnight shifts in slaughterhouses and factories, and some may die today because they don't have the knowledge or skills to do the job that they're supposed to be doing. But they're doing it because they need to repay debts to their smugglers and traffickers. Children, boys and girls, are being sold for sex. Just last month, I spoke with a care provider in Florida who told me about cases of migrant children as young as 8 with sexually transmitted diseases. 8 years old. Last week,
Man, we had an opioid pandemic. Why is it our concern to worry about them? Where the fuck are their parents at? And I don't mean to sound cruel, but we had our own issues to worry about. So why is it cool to take on somebody else's responsibility when they ain't trying to tackle their own situation? I'm just saying.
I spoke with a private investigator in Texas who shared challenges trying to find an emergency shelter for this one girl. She's only 12, an unaccompanied minor who was 9 months pregnant and about to go into labor. How did we get here? How did we get here? For over a decade, the United States Department of Health and Human Services has been responsible for the suffering of countless children. HHS has a 10-year demonstrated record of losing children to sponsors who abuse, exploit, traffic, and harm children in unthinkable ways. Now, to be fair to HHS, they are not an investigative or law enforcement agency. HHS simply does not have the knowledge, skills, ability, or the tradecraft to protect children from traffickers. Child trafficking has evolved into an international syndicate of gangs and cartels. It's highly organized and efficient. It mirrors the tactics and operations of terrorist organizations. Smugglers and traffickers have moved more than 500,000 children. They flooded across our borders, and we have delivered them to criminals and traffickers and members of transnational criminal organizations who are using the UC program as a white glove delivery service of children. Criminal sponsors are defrauding the U.S. government by using this government program as a logistical chain in their trafficking operation. These children are not merely victims, they are hostage of transnational criminals and the financial backbone of material support for organizations seeking to profit off of the lives of children. This simply must change. Now, there is hope if we act with urgency. Let's implement simple safety measures like DNA testing for children and their sponsors. Let's implement stringent penalties like prison for sponsors who are unable to produce the children they are in charge of. And again, there's hope if we act, but action must include oversight, transparency, and accountability. Now, according to oversight conducted by Senator Grassley, who's been a true champion of these endangered children, HHS failed to fully comply with subpoenas that were issued by DHS to investigate evidence of child exploitation the senator referred to law enforcement earlier this year. That's just simply unacceptable. HHS should be commanded to comply with the Inspector General Empowerment Act to enable cross-agency data sharing. And let's treat child trafficking as the national security threat that it truly is. Let's mobilize the full power of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to dismantle these criminal networks. 1, we can elevate the activity of child trafficking on the NIPIF, which is the National Intelligence Priority Framework. Number 2, we can designate child trafficking as a terrorist activity so that centers like the National Counterterrorism Center, the Terrorist Screening Center, the National Targeting Center can provide the manpower, the tradecraft, and immediate implementation of targeting these trafficking networks. Every child lost to the current system is a tragedy. We cannot be a nation that looks the other way. We have a moral imperative to care for children that the government takes into custody. And the time to act is now. Children are in need now. Children are depending on you now. And I thank you for your time and your attention to this crisis of this trafficked, exploited, and missing children. And I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Rodas. Members will be recognized by order of seniority for the 5 minutes of questioning. An additional round of questioning may be called after all members have been recognized. I need to advise members we have votes scheduled for 4 o'clock. So I'm going to be strict about 5 minutes. Please watch the clock. Keep your questioning to 5 minutes. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. America needs to understand that the historical model of the cartel operations has changed quite drastically in the last 4 years. We had always envisioned that criminal cartels, essentially born in their modern form in the 80s and 90s, have taken control of the criminal operations and the pipelines for drugs and human beings across Central America and Mexico up to our entire southern border, which is 1,954 miles of sovereign border. And as Americans, we envision that cartels operate south of that border. They traffic drugs and human beings to the border. They make a lot of money doing it. It's all criminal. They're brutal. And we have envisioned that there was always a measure of sovereign protection of our nation at the southern border, and cartel operations sort of stopped. We also recognize that within the interior of our country, we have traditional criminal networks that exist in our densities of population, commonly run by gangs. And those operations, although similar to cartel operations, were not nearly as organized or incredibly well funded, but they operated independently of the cartels in many, many hundreds of factions across the country. And what America has to understand right now is that the cartel operations now operate across the entire United States, and their pipelines continue through Central America and Mexico, across our southern border, into our major cities. I have reports of entire buildings held by cartels, old hotels and apartment complexes. The cartels are buying for cash, taking possession of for cash. They're running their operations out of there, not one, but several buildings like that, in a density of population, a network of sexual slavery operations and drug distribution operations, each easy to walk away from on short notice of a pending raid by law enforcement. America has to understand that this has happened, that historically the cartels would bring their product, human beings and drugs, to the southern border. It'd be some level of interaction by CBP, by federal law enforcement, state and local law enforcement, and then unaccompanied children would be processed through HHS and turned over to non-government organizations, where they would be turned over to family sponsors, either family or non-family, but sponsors that were vetted in some manner. This is a memorandum of understanding that operated for a long time. It was quite significant, between the Office of Refugee Resettlement and the United States Department of Health and Human Services, the beginning process by which unaccompanied children were delivered to sponsors that were vetted. Because of the volume of children that were coming across in the last 4 years, and a part of that, the HHS and DHS joint statement of termination of this agreement, and this is from March of 2021, my brothers and sisters. This was a policy decision to step away from the strict means by which these children were monitored and controlled. And what it was replaced with was this sponsor care agreement. There's nothing to this. It's 3.5 pages, 2 pages of nothing that the criminal networks can easily take advantage of. So we have now delivered hundreds of thousands of unaccompanied children to unvetted sponsors that have enslaved them across our country. Ms. Hopper, you have done some brilliant research on the connection between trafficking, human trafficking, south of the border, and as it networks into our country. Please expound upon what I've been discussing today.
Thank you, Chairman Higgins. You're correct. The terrorists, the cartels, sorry, the terms are interchangeable to me. They do know our policies and the 94 actions that were rescinded upon the new current administration coming in. And they actually do use our programs and the manner in which we process unaccompanied children against us. They actually use Border Patrol and refer to them as migrant Uber. They know once migrants cross the border, it's one phone call away, the Border Patrol picks them up and processes them, and then they know to write the number and name of the sponsor the child. Sorry.
I'm not stopping you. I'm just telling you we're out of time here.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, ma'am. My time has expired, and I recognize the ranking member, Mr. Correa, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hear your testimony, and anybody who's listening to your testimony has to cringe to think of what you're saying and the words, what they mean. Looking at some data, the biggest group of sex trafficked minors, reported cases, are American citizen children in the United States. So the chairman's discussion that this is an international operating across international lines is absolutely correct. We have a lot of work to do. We're going to have to work with our partners to make sure we begin to address this challenge. You know, last week I heard David Beasley, former governor of South Carolina, speaking. He was at the Aspen Institute talking about hunger in the world. It was interesting because at this lecture, it was standing room only. We had senators and Congress members there listening to his discussion. And his message was a sad one. It was a warning to us. And he was telling us that hunger around the world is only going to get worse. Situation around the world is in a crisis mode. And as soon as parts of the world like Africa and the rest of Latin America begin to really starve, heaven help us. You don't take my word for it, take his. He won a Nobel Prize recently. He's former head of the UN World Food Relief Organization. And I say this to you because, again, during my opening statement, I said, we got to figure out the roots of this challenge. We can shut off the border. We'll do that. I doubt if it's going to work. You're still going to have children being trafficked. There's always a way when there's a profit to be made. So in my 3 minutes I have left, I'm going to, very complex issue, trying to break it down little pieces. But I'm going to ask each one of you, very succinctly, tell me, what would you do that would be quick and effective to stop sex trafficking?
Miss Sunshine, Miss Sunkiss, my bad. What's called, I just dropped the date down. It seemed like it was November 19th. I was supposed to do this back then because there was another one that I did that went along with this. I was supposed to do them back to back, but got caught up in the holiday things and I'm running about 2 weeks late. So, yeah, this was about 2 weeks ago, just before the holidays.
Mr. Carroll, a few words, a couple of sentences.
Yes, sir. In order to stop child sex trafficking coming across the border must be closed, period.
To tourists, to commerce, all of the above.
Sir, we have ports of entry. That's where we come through. Ports of entry, we don't come through the steel fence. No, thank you.
Ms. Hopper, what would you say? What would your answer be?
To actually build on what Mr. Krell was saying, once the borders are closed, reinstate DNA testing.
Thank you. Ms. Laren.
You know, we found that child trafficking is complex. It involves law enforcement, it involves services to children, it involves multiple programs across the federal government. I think better coordination between those programs will help.
Ms. Rodas.
I believe we must designate child trafficking as a terrorist activity. This would unlock critical counterterrorism tools, including expanded intelligence collection, interagency collaboration, and financial sanctions to dismantle trafficking infrastructure through interagency
Would that include
collaboration.
additional resources?
No.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Laren, I'm going to focus on you in the last minute I have. 2020, GAO identified a host of problems with the Trump administration management of temporary shelters, failing to check state licenses of providers who ran these shelters, failing to conduct audits to ensure the facilities met standards, insufficient information sharing with their agencies. Anything happen with that? Were those issues taken care of?
Yeah, as I mentioned in my testimony, we made 8 recommendations covering all of those deficiencies that we found in our work during 2018 and 2019. Of them, 5 of the recommendations have been closed as implemented, and 3 of the recommendations are still open, but progress has been made to address them.
Which ones would those be in the last 30 seconds here?
I'm sorry?
Which of the 3 recommendations are still open?
There's still recommendations open related to maintaining, ensuring that policies are being followed and maintaining records accurately.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I'm out of time. I yield.
Gentleman yields, and Mr. Bishop is recognized.
So, Mr. Carroll, we're hearing some amazing things today. Children being sacrificed to harvest organs. Of course, somebody said they don't, Mr. Ivey said he's not so sure about that. You got the amazing 8-year-old with sexually transmitted diseases, 12-year-old 9 months pregnant. My colleagues on the minority are very concerned, though, about your language. What do you think of that?
I find it fascinating and interesting that after hearing about all this testimony, and right now, thousands of children are being raped. That's just statistical probability, 100%. Children are being murdered, and I'm going to quote President Trump when he said, a lot of these children are already dead, end quote. What I find fascinating is all of this that we got to talk about, all this tragedy that we're dealing with. And we want to talk about what I said about Speaker Johnson in a podcast that I don't even remember. I think maybe it goes back to the congressman. Would he like to ask me a question that has any relevance to helping secure these children? And then you go back further, sir. The reason why we are in this position is because we destroyed the border, not just the southern border, the northern border, and both coastlines. This is a tragedy, and it is treason, because this is not bad policy or bad mistakes or somebody's incompetent. This is intentional. So when you do intentional acts against your nation, that is treason. And I'll be glad to talk about Speaker Johnson and him funding NGOs to the hilt. I would love to talk about that as well.
Ms. Hopper, I sat in another briefing on this subject, and one of the witnesses there, a libertarian guy, as I recall, sort of said, these people that have all gone off grid, the people that ORR can't contact, there's no problem. They don't want to, they sort of live, they don't want to have contact with official sources, but they're fine. I find that to be amazing, but can you respond to that? I mean, you've seen a fair number of things, it sounds like.
So if American citizens can't deflect from agencies like CPS and just respond and say, oh, these children are fine, you don't need to do a home check or foster care checks or welfare checks on American citizens, and you don't take American citizens' words that the children are fine, why would you take the word of a sponsor who you don't know, don't have accurate background records, and if they are an illegal migrant, many background checks haven't been done on them. So we are handing kids over to known MS-13 members and known pedophiles. So I'm sorry, I'm not willing to take someone's word that the child is okay.
Isn't that unbelievable callous indifference to take the position that these people are just, not wanting to be in touch with authorities? Isn't that a horrific disregard of human beings that are being abused and suffering? Would you agree?
I agree.
Ms. Rodas, one of the, Mr. Correa, I believe, just made the point that the United States is already I think he said, the leading location of sex trafficking in the United States. We've been having whatever resources are in law enforcement already sorely tested. What will happen to the American children that might be rescued from?
I'm not sure what group this is. They named a few groups that's doing this though throughout this hearing.
Sex trafficking. If our already overtaxed, overburdened law enforcement resources have to bear this additional immense burden, what's going to? Aren't they all going to suffer? All the children who would benefit from those services if you just have more and more of them, unless we can pay more and more. How much would it cost? How many trillions of dollars would it cost to stop this entirely?
Well, I would submit that you could save a few $1 billion by not running the program in the manner that it's being run. I'm very unclear as to why we're luring children to the United States to be the white glove delivery system of these children to known MS-13, 18th Street Gang, Russian Balkan crime syndicates, and other unsavory characters. We've known since February of 2021 when DHS whistleblower Aaron Stevenson came forward. We've known since 2015 when DHS whistleblower Jason Piccolo came forward. The children are being used.
My time's expired,
Yes,
and
sir.
very well said. Someone may get a chance to follow it up. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Ivey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Schroeder, you picked up 2 books there. What were they?
So this book is actually called Out of Shadows by Dr. Jason Piccolo. He was the very first whistleblower in 2015. So prior to when the chairman referenced the severing of the DHS and HHS information sharing agreement because they didn't want chilling on their sponsors, at one point, this brave whistleblower, when he was looking and had the ability to look at the data, said, hey, we are giving children to criminals and pedophiles and traffickers, and that was 20.
Okay, that was 2015. And what was the other book I think you had?
Oh, it wasn't a book, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I referenced Aaron Stevenson, who is the DH whistleblower from 2021. He was the TOC mission expert, that's the Transnational Organized Crime mission expert, and he identified the very first time in the history of the program that a TOC member, because of all the relaxation of the vetting, was able to sponsor a child. And that brave whistleblower lost his job for coming forward to expose child sex trafficking.
All right, let me ask a couple of questions to follow up on what I think I've heard. I think you and Ms. Hopper mentioned resuming DNA testing
Yes.
as steps that should be taken. Prison for sponsors who lose their, I wrote charges, but unaccompanied children. I think that was you, Ms. Rodas, as a solution? Okay. Do you know if there's federal law that covers that, or do you think federal law would need to be implemented to address that?
We would probably need to say, yeah, we would need to put in a law because it doesn't currently exist. I think it's very important for people to understand, just like PRS is not enforceable.
Fair enough. I'm running out of time. I apologize. You also mentioned that you thought this was a 10-year problem, and you raised concerns about HHS not having the tools or the expertise to address some of these problems because of the cartel involvement, I take it, that has become part of this?
Well, even Mr. Carey, who used to formerly be with HHS, he's even said they're not law enforcement. They know they're not law enforcement.
So that would be DOJ then potentially, or other law enforcement entities that should be more involved with this?
Absolutely.
All right.
DHS.
And then, I think this was Ms. Lauren. You mentioned, and to Mr. Correa too, that some of the changes that had been made, more accurate licenses, better information regarding past allegations of misconduct, because sometimes entities would, even though they'd been identified for misconduct, would still be receiving unaccompanied children. That needed to be addressed. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right. And then you said something about improving the ability to confirm that kids are in school, aware of their court dates and the like. And I was curious about how that would be done. Would that, you'd have to increase the number of people who have oversight over these children, or how would that work?
I mean, what we're really asking for is documentation. We're asking that when they reach out and children receive post-release services, HHS keeps a record of that so that they can show which kids have gotten the services, which haven't, and that's what they
So
haven't been able to do.
the kids reach out, if they call, for example, that would be tracked.
No, it's exactly.
Okay, and then Mr. Carroll, I apologize, I'm running out of time. You had 3 points. Well, first of all, let's begin with the organ harvesting issue. So, Ms. Hopper, I think you identified issues, but I think the ones you mentioned were in Mexico. Are there any you're pointing to in the United States? Not that that makes it better, but I just want to make sure we know what we're talking about here.
You are correct. You had mentioned that there were no footnotes. I was not going to put a incarcerated cartel member's information out there, but that would be the footnote. However,
Now I'm gonna have to stop his punk ass. How do he not know about the ones that's going on in this country that we've been hearing about for the last 10 years plus? I mean, some of these people are just stuck on stupid. We know about them. How come you don't know about them and we elected you to sit in that seat? Don't make no damn sense. Let's get back to the show.
they were harvested for buyers that were in the U.S. looking for those organs.
For footnotes, what I would mean in that instance would be, for example, if there are cases that have been brought to prosecute, you could cite those. But but the fact that I just want to nail down they're not in the United States. Mr. Carroll, you made an allegation about organ harvesting as well. Are you saying that's taking place in the United States or somewhere else?
In my documentary, I interviewed multiple people.
Please give me the quick answer.
Yes, this happened in America, and to deny that is...
I'm not asking you to deny it, but have any charges been brought against anyone for doing that?
I don't know that right now, sir.
Okay, and then you mentioned that as your three parts of your solution, every single one of the 550,000 unaccompanied children should be identified. After they are identified, what's the next step in the process that would happen there? What happens to those kids after we identify them?
We make sure they're safe.
In what way? What do you have in mind?
I don't understand the question. By what way? I don't understand.
The gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Guest is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Carroll, first I want to thank you for your 24 years of service to your country and for all that you are doing to call attention to that has costed the lives to your
Footnotes, what I would mean in that instance would be, for example, if there are cases that have been brought to prosecute, you could cite those. But but the fact that I just want to nail down they're not in the United States. Mr. Carroll, you made an allegation about organ harvesting as well. Are you saying that's taking place in the United States or somewhere else?
In my documentary, I interviewed multiple people.
Please give me the quick answer.
Yes, this happened in America, and to deny that is...
I'm not asking you to deny it, but have any charges been brought against anyone for doing that?
I don't know that right now, sir.
Okay, and then you mentioned that as your three parts of your solution, every single one of the 550,000 unaccompanied children should be identified. After they are identified, what's the next step in the process that would happen there? What happens to those kids after we identify them?
We make sure they're safe.
In what way? What do you have in mind?
I don't understand the question. By what way? I don't understand.
You not understand? Well, you did answer the question. But why is he asking such stupid ass questions? And Miss Sunkiss, I believe you're right. I think he might be making money off of this on the back end. A lot of these people are just crooked. Good morning, Rum Shaker. Yes, it feels good to be back, trying to get back into the groove. No, I didn't forget about you. Everything is working on the back end. I had to realize I haven't created nothing in the last 9 months. So right now I'm on turbo to beat to the end of the year. I will be with you soon. But let's get back to the show.
The gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Guest is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Carroll, first I want to thank you for your 24 years of service to your country and for all that you are doing to call attention to the crisis along our southwest border. Ms. Hopper, I also want to thank you as well, direct my questions first to you, Ms. Hopper. You state in your written testimony, you talk about this not being a political issue, that this is in fact a humanitarian crisis that has costed the lives of countless children. You go in to talk about the devastation that you've seen firsthand, and that you have seen cartel members operating with impunity along our southwest border. We are well aware of human trafficking and the number of individuals who are brought into the country illegally, both children and adults. Some of those forced into modern-day slavery to pay back the cost of their safe travel across the border. We're also very well aware of sex trafficking. We're aware that individuals are brought into the country and they're sex trafficked once they've entered the country. And you do a great job in your report talking about issues of sexual violence that occur during transit. You talk about that, you say here that there's a disturbing aspect of cartel operations and the sexual exploitation that occurs at specific points along the smuggling route. And you even refer to those as what are known as rape trees, where young women and in some cases possibly young men are sexually assaulted by those individuals that are giving them passage across the border. And so while we as a committee are well aware of those allegations, you also bring up another disturbing, shocking new category, I guess, if you will. And I think, Mr. Carroll, you may have addressed that briefly as well. Involving the harvesting of organs, and that drug cartels are now moved into this new category of activity involving harvesting. In many cases, it seems like from reading your testimony, I'm going to ask you to expand on that in just a minute, that these are migrants who are attempting to travel into the United States. That drug cartels are in cases harvesting organs of those individuals. You said that this is a common practice that occurs at both veterinarian clinics and hospitals, I'm assuming there in Mexico. And you even talk about a report from August of 2024 where there were 2 American college students who were there in Mexico who were drugged with the belief that they were to be apprehended so that their organs could be harvested. And so as we move into this, I just want to give you a minute to enlighten our committee about what you have found as it relates specifically to drug cartels, which are now moving into this disturbing new arena of harvesting organs of individuals attempting to come to the United States.
Thank you for the opportunity to expand on that. During the interview with the former Sinaloa cartel affiliate, he expanded on a lot of what you highlighted. He expanded on the fact that these migrant children, especially if they're traveling without their parent, there is no way to communicate whether they've made it through their journey or not. And if a cartel member or smuggler gets a call that there is a specific organ that they're looking for, they will scout out those organs and especially focus on migrant children, namely for the fact that they are vulnerable, they're unable to fight back, and, as horrid as it sounds, their organs are more, intact and in better shape. So there is no way to communicate with these children once they've crossed into the border, so they kind of disappear on the way.
And Mr. Carroll, let me ask you, because since you've also talked on this subject briefly, do you agree with the assessment of Ms. Hopper on the organ harvesting, and do you have anything that you would like to add?
Organ harvesting is real. To think that it's not, that we're trafficking, this federal government's bringing children over, they're being lost, sexually mutilated, sexually raped, murdered, and then we're shocked or appalled that there could be organ harvesting. The people I've interviewed, multiple people, said, and I asked them, is this an anomaly? Is this a one-off? No, this is pervasive and is growing daily.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Ms. Ramirez recognized for questioning.
Thank you, Chairman and ranking members. I'm not surprised that my Republican colleagues here, including one who has so candidly and callously posted racist tweets about Haitian immigrants, are calling up yet another witness with no credibility on the hearing topic, who believe in conspiracy theories, write about it, and promote lies, alt-right extremist ideologies, to be here. On your X account, Mr. Corral, formerly Twitter, you asked, what is treason? Well, let me answer for you. This right here, this is treason. In one of your tweets, you claim violent January 6 rioters who destroyed public property and attempted to stop a democratic transition of power as political prisoners. I find it to be shameful that a former law enforcement agent would defend a mob who beat law enforcement officers protecting this very building.
Son of a bitch. So you mean to tell me we talking about exploited kids and you have the nerve to attack American citizens that was standing up for their rights in their eyes? In my eyes too, and I wasn't even there. But your ass is weak. She need to be fired. This was not the time to bring this back up again after all this shit has been thrown out last week. Well, this was the week before that, but she weak as hell. Throw her out, fire her, don't re-elect her.
In another post, you write, mass deportations will be swift, but they will be deadly. Actually, I agree with you on that. They will be deadly. So I find it unforgivable that you, Trump, and Republican members of this committee would even advocate for it. In another post, you say we should destroy the federal government and that the federal government is the enemy. I find that odd considering you were once a federal employee and you've been begging to come back into the incoming Trump administration for a new job. Lastly, you posted that the federal government is the epicenter of pedophilia. An outright falsehood with perhaps the exception of Trump's stellar attorney general pick. I have no questions for you. No one serious about our role here should be asking you questions. Your misleading statements are counterproductive. And this committee tomorrow is supposed to be having, although I'm hearing we may not have.
So, what she just brought up ain't counterproductive? That's the Democrat for you. I mean, they don't have no logical common sense of what's going on around them, and they'll just speak on the same thing nonstop. When the cold country on November 5th knew that you were lying, shut up about that shit and find out about the kids. I'm just saying.
A committee hearing on worldwide threats. To me and so many others, the fear-mongering, the racist invasion rhetoric that you and extremist Republicans spread, in my opinion, is probably the truest threat to our homeland. So, Ms. Laren, I want to ask you a question. And first, let me start by saying more than 4,000 children were forcibly separated from their parents under Trump's family separation policy, including infants who were literally removed from their mother's arms. Because of that administration's cruelty and incompetence, more than 1,400 of these children still have not been reunited with their parents, more than 6 years later. They may never be reunited with their parents. Trump has said that he will do it again. He will deport and separate families. Ms. Laren, can you tell us why it's been so difficult to reunite children separated under President Trump?
You know, there are several reasons. First, there was no planning before the separation policy was put in place. So DHS and ORR didn't have an opportunity to put procedures in place to track the children. There was no database that both agencies could access and share to track the whereabouts of the children. And in HHS's database, ORR's database, there was no field to indicate even whether the child had been separated from a parent. So it became a very labor-intensive paper process.
This motherfucker here is full of shit too. So you mean to tell me you went against the Constitution in this pandemic and had trackers and all this stuff put on U.S. citizens to keep track of that virus, but you couldn't keep track of these damn kids coming across the border? Like I said, a lot of these people talk to us like we fucking stupid. Fire her ass too. Whatever position she in, fire her ass too. I'm sick of all these motherfuckers.
To reunite children with their family members, that has taken many years and, as you say, is ongoing.
Do you think that particularly the babies, the toddlers, the 1-year-olds who are ripped away from their families will ever be reunited?
they were particularly difficult to reunite because they could not advocate for themselves.
Yeah, thank you. Look, folks, you have the trifecta. You'll have an opportunity to pass solutions. We want to address the issues, and look, I'm the first to tell you, I don't want to hear about one woman being raped across.
And shut the fuck up. Nobody should be coming up with the solutions except for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They the ones who invited them fools across the freaking border. We didn't want them here. We never wanted them here. The Democrats who do it, I mean, they can leave when they leave. I mean, I'm just saying.
That border. My mother experienced it while pregnant with me, crossing that border. So let me tell you something. If you decide that you are going to be the party that's going to bring solutions and create the legal pathway so no child is kidnapped, raped, or no woman is, then I look forward to working with you on that. But if all we're going to continue to do in this committee is bring people here who continue to dehumanize children and families who are risking everything because they have lost everything crossing that border, then I'm going to continue to push back and fight back because I actually understand what's happening in these countries.
She has not once said anything that's part of this situation. She is neglecting the kids by bringing up January 6th, something that happened almost 4 years ago now. And if you did your homework on it and watched some of the 40 to 50,000 hours of video that they released online and you can see otherwise, why is she still talking about it? She was part of the protesters coming through the building. I bet you she had a whole damn, what do you call it, little hall banner from back in school and shit. She was hallway patrol, boy. She was just escorting the damn protest through just like the police was. She just seemed guilty, or we messing up her investments.
Visited these countries. I want to get to the root cause of migration. I want to get to solutions. You've been talking about policy solutions. You're going to have the opportunity to do it.
The gentlewoman from Georgia, Ms. Green, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The root cause of migration is a federal government.
I understand folks don't like her, what the news say, but anytime she's on this channel at one of these meetings, she drops straight fire. I don't understand why folks don't like her, but I didn't hear this part, so let's see how she light them on fire. Yeah, I hear a lot of people say that, but I go by the people's actions, and usually I know when to call them out of. Like a lot of people fell for Ron DeSantis. You know what I'm saying? I was calling him out for other reasons. Abbott's over there in Texas with the border. I was calling them out for other things because I'm seeing we still have snakes at the bottom of the swamp. They just very well hidden. So just because we win and they represent the Republican and we think all Republicans are for all Republicans, no, that's not the case. It's about when to draw the snake out. And it will be time for this Marjorie Taylor Greene and Abbott and DeSantis, and it's just not right at the moment because the basket is full with all the other motherfuckers. The swamp is drained and we see it all. I'm just saying.
That has legalized an invasion into this country. That's the root cause. And you talk about treason, I can tell you right now, I consider that treason against American citizens. This has been an invasion in this country, and the cartels have benefited by tens of billions of dollars. Mass deportations cannot happen fast enough. Not fast enough. Not for the cartels, terrorists, gangs, and criminals that have made billions and billions of dollars, and children have been the biggest victims of it. Human trafficking is a $150 billion a year industry. In 2021, Georgia had one of the highest number of cases per capita that were reported through trafficking hotlines. Approximately 1/3 of all human trafficking victims are children. The United States is one of the top destinations for human trafficking and is among the largest consumers of child sex. That is sick. The average age of entry into the commercial sex market is 12 years old. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been complicit, just as you testified, Mr. Carroll, in making the United States federal government the world's largest child sex trafficking organization in modern history. My God, what has happened to our country? This administration has adhered to our enemies and allowed cartels and coyotes to make around $13 billion a year in human trafficking alone. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Mayorkas have allowed over 500,000 unaccompanied alien children to cross our border. As Mr. Carroll testified, the probability that thousands of these alien children are being raped at this very moment is 100%. Ms. Rodish, you further highlighted that when we learned in February 23 that 85,000 of these children were missing, zero action was taken to rescue the children, and zero action was taken to prevent other children from being lost in...
Whoa, I put myself on mute. So you mean to tell me, because I said this at the beginning of the show, that it was 85,000 missing, 80 to 85,000. I did those hearings on this channel, but I did not realize that it was 2023. I'm thinking it was February of this year. Unless they was lying this year, because right now, because what I'm looking at, we went from January, February, 80 to 85,000 to over 350,000 right now. Which that'll be a huge jump within a few months, within 7 to 8 months. So it was 23. But still, that's a lot in almost 2 years. 350,000 kids missing.
slave labor, commercial sex, organ harvesting, and other unspeakable evils. I don't care if the organ harvesting happened in Mexico. If the buyers are in the United States, we got a serious problem. And consequently, more than a year later, in July 2024, we learned that this administration has lost track of more than 320,000 children. How on earth do we do that? The failures, that's how. These are the results of Democrat policies. The Democrats want to claim moral superiority and accuse us of family separation policies. Well, they are the party of child sex trafficking, and the American people spoke out about that on the election. Surrendering control of our border to the cartels, expediting vetting processes, and refusing to share data with law enforcement so they can dismantle the trafficking infrastructure are the policies of Democrats. More than 100 children being released to the same address in Austin, Texas, is a policy of the Democrats. Mr. Carroll, in your documentary, What is Treason?, there's some very heart-wrenching claims about the trafficking of unaccompanied children. Several of the most disturbing claims we heard are religious organizations and NGOs are operating as co-conspirators. These organizations are used as the pipeline to traffic the children to the end abuser in many instances. Other disturbing claims made include pedophilia rings, purchasing children, as well as organ harvesting. Can you please talk in specifics about the evidence and finding of your research that have led you to these conclusions?
That's a great question, because the problem, the federal government does not have the ability, the capacity, or the manpower to move 30 million people that have crossed the border in the last 4 years into America. They can't. So who do they partner with? The federal government partner with the NGOs, all cloaked under the umbrella of religion.
And they're paying them with American tax dollars, by the way.
We are talking about, this is Joe Biden's numbers and statistics. In 4 years, he will have spent over $700 billion on illegal immigrants to surpass $1 trillion. That's the range that we have. I'm telling you, these NGOs are making tens and hundreds of billions of dollars, and they are the traffickers.
But Mr. Carroll, can you talk specifically about the organ harvesting? Where do we find evidence of this? Who do we need to talk to?
Well,
It would be messed up if we find out this is how they caught Diddy. I'm just saying.
this is just like somebody says, well, show me where the drug cartels are. They're not showing you where they are. The organ harvesting is not gonna, they're not gonna show you, it's not 60 minutes. They're not gonna come and show you, hey, this is what we're doing, this is how it's going. I'm talking to people that are inside the belly of the beast, that are hunting children down to save them, to going after organizations that go after the giant.
Gentlewoman's time has expired.
This is happening in America. Undeniable.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Clark is recognized. for
Yes,
5
thank you,
minutes.
Mr. Facts. President-elect Trump and his would-be newly appointed border czar, Tom Homan, who is known as the father of family separation, falsely claimed that people will not come to the United States border if they know they will be ripped apart from their family. Yet, under their watch and the cruel policies, illegal entry at the border increased dramatically under Trump's first term before the pandemic halted migration around the world. Facts. Caring for children was not and is not a priority for the Trump administration. The Trump administration had no plans for how to care for the children they whipped away from their parents. GAO found that the Trump administration had no contingencies in place to deal with the thousands of children they separated from.
Shut your black ass up. How in the hell is Trump at the top of any of this conversation when we just went through a whole 4 years of a different administration that suspended everything that he had? What the fuck is this goofy eye glaring wearing bitch goddamn talking about? I can't stand these kind of fools because they talk to us like we goddamn dumb. You think she telling the truth? There's other proof out there that says that she's lying. But I'm gonna take your word on it, Mrs. Sunkiss, if she's telling the truth. But I don't see where it's possible. I've been following this stuff for quite a few, almost 2 decades. There was things put on this guy that, you know what I'm saying, that just don't line up compared to somebody who was there 8 years before him. It's like it's a lot of blame put on a guy who only served 4 years, and within that 4 years, all they did was give him hell, and he still accomplished what he accomplished. It don't line up to what they saying, because if that was true, that means the rest of America would have seen this by now. As much stuff as they don't point it out, and they wouldn't have voted for him again. Trust me, they wouldn't have. So that tells me this woman is lying. Because I just seen the information. I just know how it went down, and it ain't what she's saying. Is that a jerry curl or a dry? I don't know what the hell is that on top of her head. But Miss Sunkiss, if this is the first time you've been to this show, I do joke the hell out of these Democrats on this show. I'm not gonna lie to you. That don't mean that I'm a Republican and all that. No, I just know liars when I see them. You know what I'm saying? Not taking nothing away from the knowledge that you might have or anything like that, because everybody has different knowledge coming to the table. But I do cook these suckers over here, so grab you some popcorn. It do get quite funny. Like that ugly jacket she got on. That jacket, man. Looked like Pam Grier was wearing that back in the 1977 movie or something. Boy, that jacket old as hell. But let's get back to the show.
Their families, and this is why children remain separated to this day. So, Ms. Laren, could you explain more about what GAO found and why this became such a large problem?
Yeah, we looked at the family separation policy back when it was happening. And as I mentioned before, we found that there was a lack of planning. There was a lack of consistent data that DHS and HHS had on these children. There was no way to record which children had been separated from their parents. And yeah, the separation policy created a crisis at ORR because they weren't prepared for the number of very young children. Most shelters were really geared towards 13 to 17-year-olds and weren't really ready to take care of infants and young children. So they really had to scramble to be able to do that. It created a crisis.
This is a fact. My Republican colleagues pretend to care about children, but their actions say otherwise. They defended President-elect Trump's family separation policy, put kids in cages, joked about it, and left kids at the mercy of the cartels by making the...
Gotta stop her right there. Kids in cages was under the Obama administration, and he had to clean that up once he came in. So if they were still in cages when he got in office, the only reason why they was in cages is because he haven't got to that part yet because Obama left them in cages. I'm just saying. But what they saying don't line up for 4 years. But we see what this dude did in 4 years. And eyes open the same way. It's like we don't see that through Trump. We see it through Obama and Biden. And that's not trying to make Trump innocent or anything like that. I'm just going off of what I see. And I mean, when are the families going to take accountability for putting their children in that position? They knew the risk of coming here trying to get across the border before they even got to that situation. I mean, they knew what time it was. There got to be some accountability, and it shouldn't be all on the president. It should be on those parents of those kids, too. I'm just saying.
Wait in Mexico under the migrant protection protocols. Just this Congress, they tried to undo protections for children in the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act. Why don't we hear Republicans talk about the harm that those policies do to children? When they have full control of the government next Congress, I hope to see my colleagues take actions to make children safer. Director Laren, your agency completed a report in December of 2023 that analyzed federal efforts to counter child trafficking and made several recommendations. Ms. Laren, can you speak to those recommendations and how the Biden administration has made efforts to resolve them?
Yeah, we found that while there are a number of programs that serve all human trafficking victims, including children, there are 6 programs specifically in the federal government, both at the Department of Justice and at HHS, that are focused on children. And what we recommended is that an interagency task force be formed to ensure that those efforts are coordinated so that children who are victims receive the services that they're entitled to. And that recommendation to both DOJ and HHS has been implemented. There is an interagency task force to coordinate.
Very well. And are you aware of whether concerns about the lack of contingencies and appropriate planning were raised before family separation was implemented?
Yeah, the lack of planning meant that the agencies had to figure it out on the fly. And that was really the key deficiency, was a system for tracking where the children were. And that's what didn't exist because there was no time to plan for it.
Well, I thank you very much for your response. Mr. Chairman, I think that, this is a very serious issue. But the way that this committee has conducted this hearing, bringing entertainment to the table to share with us their opinions and opine without facts, this committee has never done that. And I see that that's the rabbit hole we're going down. Mr. Chairman, we need to put this in check before it gets out of hand. And I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. The gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Zell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's pretty obvious today that we have a lot of differences of opinions. I've spent my entire life until coming to Congress as a police officer, sheriff, or chief of police, and I have seen firsthand, I have held the victim's hand who has been violently raped and abused. And let me tell you something, it is the worst thing you will ever witness in your life to see a victim of rape and terrible abuse. There's nothing that compared to it except for murder. And that victim is no longer able to speak, but I have seen firsthand just how terrible it is. It's no secret here that the border's wide open. It's no secret that everything has been going on for the last 3.5 years. And what I've heard today, Ms. Lauren, with all due respect, I've heard you answer questions several times about lack of planning on the Trump administration for whatever failures they had. So tell me what some of the successful planning that we have seen over the last 3.5 years out of this Biden administration to stop some of these hundreds of thousands of people coming across this border. What have this Biden administration done the last 3.5 years to plan and to stop what we have seen?
Now he talking.
Yeah, I can't speak to border control issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but what I've heard you say multiple times, a lack of planning. I hadn't seen very much planning coming out of this administration. So what I'd like to go into, what I'd like to ask Mr. Carroll and anybody else who would like to answer this, can you name some of these NGOs that have specifically taken these hundreds of millions of dollars and not used it to protect these children?
Catholic Charities, Lutheran Family Services, Jewish Family Services. I spoke to a gentleman that works in DHS. He actually sends the electronic fund transfers, and I asked him, sir, tell me who do you send, who are you responsible for, and how much is the largest check you cut? He said, I'm over Jewish Family Services, and I cut a check for $600 million. And I said, is that for like 3 years? And he told me, JJ, get in the game. That's 2 or 3 months, and it's renewable. That's one NGO. And I said, well, Catholic Charities is bigger than
$600 million in 3 months. What in the hell? Y'all hear that shit? Man, they pimping humans. No wonder we gonna make this shit smaller and more controllable. They got too much power.
Jewish Family Services. Yes, they get the same or more. You're talking about billions upon billions of dollars given to NGOs to further the trafficking of everyone crossing the border, to include children.
Mr. Rodas, I understand you were on detail to care for and place children entering into the United States via the southwest border with sponsors in the United States. While serving on detail with HHS, I understand you sounded the alarm about how HHS handled these unaccompanied children. Thank you for your bravery. Do you believe any of these concerns were taken seriously?
Congressman, no, sadly I don't. And as I was raising the alarm along with other wonderful people who were on the site, Deb White, a fellow whistleblower, we were told you were not to be investigating the sponsors. Your job is to get the child to that sponsor. When we had children who were going to addresses that we had already ID'd as having multiple children, and I'm talking to the boss, who's an attorney, my superior, the director. She said, Tara, you need to understand at HHS, we only get sued if we keep kids in care too long. We don't get sued by traffickers. That is appalling that I heard from a federal government employee regarding children who we knew were going to addresses that were already under investigation. I've never witnessed anything in my whole life, and had I not seen it with my own eyes, I'm not sure I could believe it.
And what happened as a result of you pushing the envelope?
Well, I wasn't the most popular person on the site, but when DHS whistleblower Aaron Stevens...
Well, not just Diddy, but what if Hollywood, all these people leaving the country, was part of this? And that's the reason why they leaving the country. Where was all these kids going? We're talking about 350,000 at this point. It could be more, or it could be a little less. Because both of us confirmed the number. It was a year apart, but February it was 85,000. Now we have 350,000. Where's all these kids going? And why is Hollywood fleeing the country? That's the thing we need to be asking some of our favorite movie stars and music artists. Why are you leaving for real?
sounded the alarm and went public in August of 2021, and I saw that they were MS-13 and 18th Street gang. My husband is from El Salvador, so I know that this is not a good thing to be giving children to MS-13. They discovered that I went to the Department of Justice, Office of Inspector General, and HHS, Office of Inspector General, and it took them less than 20 days to falsely accuse me of wrongdoing, threaten me with investigation, walk me off the site, the perp walk in front of your peers, and take my badge. So that's how much they appreciated that I was revealing that children were being sponsored by MS-13.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Gentleman from New York, Mr. Swazi, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to also wish my best wishes to Mr. Bishop. I really, whenever anyone asked me about him, I said he's really a very smart guy, and you've got a lot of tremendous ability. I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. I have to tell you, I'm very sad. The whole thing's very sad. I look up at the Capitol Dome sometimes, and I'm inspired by it every time I look at it, but I think to myself, boy, that really hides a lot of dysfunction. You come into a beautiful hearing room like this, you see the drapes and the chandeliers and this dais, and it seems, so wonderful, and there's a lot of dysfunction. And it's sad, the stories everybody's telling here today about kids being raped, people being trafficked, organs being harvested, families being separated, kids in cages, parents worried about their children, people trying to make money off of other people's misery. And all we do is I heard a lot of stuff I agree with here today, but all we're doing is pointing fingers at each other. Ms. Rodas, you talked about a whistleblower in 2015 talking about sex trafficking. It didn't start all of a sudden one day on January 20th of 2021. It's been going on for decades. And we spend all of our time blaming each other and trying to point at boogeymen instead of doing our jobs in the United States Congress to try and find agreement with each other. I've got great friends on the other side of the aisle. Been talking about...
Okay, Ms. Sunkist, there you go. It's Congress. I thought it was a house, but I'm subscribed to all these shits. I don't know where they be coming from sometimes. I just jump in. If I like it, we'll run with it. You know what I'm saying? Well, but yeah, this one is Congress.
About what can we do to find some common ground, to secure the border, to fix the broken asylum system, to treat people like human beings and address some of the thorny problems related to DACA and TPS and farm workers and healthcare workers and Afghan readjustment. And we've got a lot of common ground agreement. But people are terrified on both sides of the aisle of speaking up because they're afraid that the extremists in their party are going to cut their legs off if they dare try to work with the other side. And the toxicity that we hear in this hearing room and in the media constantly, instead of trying to actually solve the problem.
I wonder, do her glasses glow in the dark? Do they got LED lighting on them things? I'm just asking.
Where these kids are suffering every day, where families are suffering. Blame, 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 blame. We got to do our jobs to find common ground, to help people that are suffering. We can find clever things for us to say about you guys and for you to say about us. I got them. I showed them. Look what I got you on. I got you on one. Let's do our jobs. Let's solve the problem. So thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I know many of you have devoted your lives to trying to address these problems. I appreciate it. I've only got a minute and a half left, but I'm not even sure what to ask you, really, other than what's the one thing you'd like us to do, Ms. Rodas? What's the one main thing you want us to do? Try and do it quick so I can give everybody a chance to shot to speak.
For me, I'm going to stick with that we need to designate child trafficking as a terrorist activity. I think this would unlock critical counterterrorism tools, expanded intelligence, interagency collaboration.
All complicated things. It's so complicated to deal with these problems. And you cannot solve complicated problems in an environment of fear and anger and blame. You can only do it when people who are reasonable are willing to sit down across from each other and say, I think this, well, I think that, well, how about this, well, how about that, and find common ground. So thank you, Ms. Rodas. Ms. Laren, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I would say the key is oversight. We have programs that are in place, and the problems occur when the implementation is not done correctly.
Who do we need to do the oversight? The Congress needs to do the oversight, or do we need your Inspector General? Who should be doing a better job of oversight?
Yes, all of the above.
Thank you, Ms. Laren. Ms. Hopper, are you back to DNA?
I would like to echo what Tara said as far as designating these organizations as terrorists.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hopper. And Mr. Carell?
Yes, sir. The root cause of all this is open borders and the destruction.
Well, we have to secure the borders. There was a bipartisan deal to secure the borders. I've got a new proposal to secure the borders. No asylum applications in between the ports of entry. That's what I'm in favor of. No executive order. No. Congress says no asylum applications in between the ports of entry. Let's create safe mobility offices. You want to do remain in Mexico? I don't want you to remain in Mexico. I want you to remain in other countries all throughout the world and apply there. And if you apply there and you get denied, you don't come in. If you get accepted, you come in. Safe mobility offices throughout the country. Thank you, Mr. Carell.
Gentleman's time has expired. Ms. McIver is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning. Votes have been called. We're trying to close out quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ranking members, and our witnesses for joining us today. Homeland security extends beyond protecting our borders and points of entry. It's about ensuring that these protections are implemented fairly and equitably. The pathway to citizenship is thought to unlock prosperity, but not everyone has the same key. I commend the Biden-Harris administration for taking significant steps to improve the care and safety of unaccompanied children, including addressing the harm caused by family separations during the Trump administration. However, more...
She just said, don't make sense. Okay, where am I at? I need to find out. Is there an extension for... Up here. Gotta be gentle with my slider.
In between the ports of entry, let's create safe mobility offices. You want to do remain in Mexico? I don't want you to remain in Mexico. I want you to remain in other countries all throughout the world and apply there. And if you apply there and you get denied, you don't come in. If you get accepted, you come in. Safe mobility offices throughout the country. Thank you, Mr. Carell.
Gentleman's time has expired. Ms. McIver is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning. Votes have been called. We're trying to close out quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ranking members, and our witnesses for joining us today. Homeland security extends beyond protecting our borders and points of entry. It's about ensuring that these protections are implemented fairly and equitably. The pathway to citizenship is thought to unlock prosperity, but not everyone has the same key. I commend the Biden-Harris administration for taking significant steps to improve the care and safety of unaccompanied children, including addressing
protection that they put out there, if we're talking about over 350,000 kids missing. See how they trick you with wording? But you can't get past me. I'm warmed up right now. So, what the hell are you talking about? You applaud them? They destroyed everything. You hearing about stories of people being raped, extortion, all kind of things going on trying to come across this border. And why do you care so much about them and you don't care about your own community? What set you from, nigga? I'm just saying. Let's continue.
The harm caused by family separations during the Trump administration. However, more must be done. And like my colleague from New York, the fine gentleman from New York stated, we must talk about what we should be doing to address the problem. We know that the Biden administration has also come to Congress for help with...
Shut the fuck up. You fired. How are you worried more about them than your own? It's so many people that look like us that just let me down the closer I paid attention of the things that they're actually doing. There's no need to applaud these people at these high seats. There's no need to congratulate them that they got this far, because they're absolutely not even doing nothing for the country. Not just us. They're not doing nothing for none of us. And I just have to be real with that shit. These fools are suckers. And they got us suckered by sitting up there doing things for others and not your own. You can go through black communities that ain't even that was there 20 years ago that ain't even no longer here no more. Shit. What happened to them over the decades? People like them. And that Tiffany Hayden, the damn woman and shit. People like them motherfuckers. I'm just saying. That's very, we got 2 minutes left. Let me get out of here before I get mad. Folks don't like when I get mad. They do shows and talk subliminal shit.
The resources needed to do more. My question is to Ms. Laren. Can you also describe some of the assistance that the Biden administration has asked for from Congress? Have you received that help yet?
Yeah, I actually can't speak to that. I'm not familiar with the Biden administration's requests.
Okay, that's interesting. All right. My closing, because I know we have to rush to votes, is that Congress has a responsibility to come together to fund and support these critical efforts. Our conversation today is vital, even though it's a little toxic, to advancing fair and equitable practices that protect all children within our borders and those seeking safety and refuge here. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
The gentlelady yields. I thank the witnesses for their testimony today and members for questions. Mr. Grady, you need to be...
Yeah, I'd like to submit a statement for the record at the right time, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, so let's do that now.
I'd like to submit a statement for the record from the Kids in Need of Defense, some recommendations on how the government can protect some of these children.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I again thank the witnesses for your testimony today and the members for the questioning. The members of the subcommittees both may have additional questions for the witnesses, and we would ask the witnesses respond to these in writing. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7 Delta, the hearing record will be open for 10 days. Without objection, the subcommittees both stand adjourned.
Okay. It seems like we made it to the end of another one. I got quite a few of these things lined up, so I might be right back. Or I might get caught up in doing something else, so I can't promise. But, yeah, this one right here was a crazy one. I see what the guy was talking about there on the end and shit. It's like they're throwing shots at each other. And a lot of shots is just things to confuse folks. You know what I'm saying? Pointing the finger when actually they should be sitting there trying to figure out how to fix this problem. To me, it don't look like majority of them was serious. Fired them. There's a lot of people about to get fired here in the next month or so. Fire them too. I mean, clean up everything. But that's just my opinion. I hope y'all enjoyed this. I hope share this out. Make sure people get put on to all this exploited kids, missing kids, trafficking, organ donating. Open people's eyes to this. So make sure you share this out and make sure you smash the like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure your notification bell is hit so you know when I'm reviewing another hearing. And there's plenty that's popping up now. So I will be quite busy. Stay tuned for other things coming from this channel and the network. State Gang Troop Sippers, you know what I'm saying? New designs, new videos coming. There's a lot of stuff coming. Be sure to subscribe to my one of my backup channels. Let me put it in here if I can find it. Got so much stuff going on here. Okay. Make sure you subscribe to my backup here, the Crime Confessions channel. I will start uploading up there real soon. Again, you know what I'm saying? And the Quiet Storm will be coming back soon. So, everything's in the works. I wish everybody have a good day, and I'll see you on the block. I'll see you back here in a few. With that being said, let's set up an outro here. And I'll go out with the. All right, peace.